All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Monday, September 20th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update. Well, across the Atlantic basin this evening, guys, we are tracking two active storms. We have Tropical Storm Peter located north of the Antilles. We have Tropical Storm Rose back off to the east, back here towards Africa, slowly moving northwest. And then we have a new invest 98L, yet another wave coming off of Africa trying to develop. So none of these storms are imminently threatening, but we are going to talk about our two active storms real quick, and then we'll loop back to 98L, which could be an issue down the road, but does have quite a lot of time for us to watch it. So we'll start with our two active storms this evening. We have Tropical Storm Peter, and we'll go ahead and take a look at this one first. Evening Hurricane Center forecast remains a moderate tropical storm, 50-mile-an-hour winds this evening. Movements to the west-northwest at 14 miles an hour. Satellite presentation of Peter is that of a very sheared tropical cyclone. We look off to the west, and we'll start with that. We zoom out real quick, and Peter located here, and there's a large upper-level low off to Peter's west, and this is imparting quite a bit of southwest wind shear over the storm. You can see the low's rotation, and the clockwise rotation is blasting Peter with very strong upper level winds. This is that part of that trough we talked about last week, how the storm was going to approach the northern Antilles, and there was going to be that large upper trough. Well, now the trough has kind of turned into this big upper low, and it continues to shear Peter. Now, despite that, the storm is hanging on. You can see the circulation center briefly exposed in that last visible satellite shot before it switches to infrared in the nighttime, and you definitely see that the storm's got some strong inflow. It's got a healthy rotation, and it is firing continuous thunderstorms off here on the east side, but they're all displaced well of where the center is. All your activity off to the, off to the west, or to the east rather, of the circulation center. So the storm remains weak, and it is going to have a hard time developing, but it doesn't appear Peter is going to be killed off completely. Instead, the system should drift off to the northwest for a couple more days, and then a cold front moving off the eastern U.S. coastline later this week will turn this back off to the west. Now, assuming Peter does survive the next 2 or 3 days as it turns, conditions likely will improve. That upper level low will eventually get moved out of the way, and Peter will enjoy some better atmospherics, and the storm could redevelop. You see the Hurricane Center brings us down to a depression Thursday and Friday, but then does re-intensify this new tropical storm on Saturday as it begins to accelerate to the north and northeast ahead of that cold front. So there is some opportunity for Peter to re-strengthen, and folks in Bermuda should keep an eye on it. Could be a somewhat of an event, tropical storm event, likely as it moves through. Being entangled up with that cold front, I doubt it to be too terribly strong, but folks in Bermuda want to keep an eye on this. But as you see, there is a high confidence for the eastern U.S. that Peter will turn well away from the Bahamas and well away from the coast, and likely won't be a big deal. Maybe a little bit of rip currents and swell waves, but the storm is not that strong, so I don't even know if that would be an issue. Probably not, I would guess. Let's go ahead and take a look at Tropical Storm Rose. So we talked about Peter here, the northern Antilles. Now we have Rose back here off to the west. So this is the evening satellite presentation of Rose. Not that much more impressive. The system itself, real quick, is a 40-mile-an-hour tropical storm. It's moving to the northwest at 16 miles an hour. And again, you can see it's much closer to Africa than it is to the U.S. East Coast. Satellite presentation also is of a somewhat sheared storm. It's just not very impressive. A lot of stronger upper-level winds to the north, and there is a displacement of the low and mid-level centers of this storm. So Rose also kind of in the same boat, but this one of no consequence to the eastern U.S. and it's really not worth talking about all that much. It will remain a tropical storm for like another 2 or 3 days, and then it's going to weaken over cooler waters, and eventually that cooler, drier air to the north is going to start sapping this thing, and it will become a remnant low by the weekend, so nothing much to worry about. You can see both in the GFS and the European model, ensembles do agree for our two storms here. They will move away and not be an issue, and the agreement from the GFS and the Euro there. So no issues for those two. So let's go ahead and talk about Invest 98L, which is our wave tonight here moving off the coast of Africa before it disappears behind this. This is something that happens every night. I don't know what this is, but I don't like it. Anyway, so this is Invest 98L. We have a wave leaving Africa. So let's real quick talk climatology. Late in the season, which we are getting to the later part of the season, it's September 20th tonight, and we are still, very much in the quote peak of the hurricane season, which is mid-August to mid-October. In fact, we are about halfway through the peak of the hurricane season. However, this part of the basin begins to shut down this time of year. What happens is these waves continue to come off of Africa through June, July, August, September, right? But really only August and early September do conditions really hit right in the Atlantic. It's about a 6 or 7 week period. Okay. What happens this time of year is all these big fronts start coming out. See this big cold front? See this big cold front over the northern Atlantic. There's another big front coming across the U.S. tonight. You start getting these big cold fronts. And when these big cold fronts come through, they start to really mess with the actual pattern. So instead of one big Atlantic high pressure that's fairly weak and guides these storms to the south and then allows them to turn up towards the U.S., instead you have these big breaks like the one Rose is following. The Rose is coming out ahead, basically out ahead of this cold front. Peter coming out ahead of this cold front that's coming across. So in a couple days, this will be offshore. Peter will follow it, turn away. Rose will turn away. These cold fronts start catching storms and taking them away. That's why what we call the Cape Verde season or the main development region season typically is shutting down this time of year. Now, waves that come off of like 98L, which is down here in the lower latitudes, it's about 8, 9, 10 degrees north, have a better chance to survive. The waters are still warm this time of year down in this region. But the trip becomes a lot more hostile. You have a lot more wind shear to deal with. You have a lot more of these cold fronts that start churning it up and causing the storm to turn more northward. There's a lot more impediments for these waves to get across. Now, is it impossible? No, it's not. But it's a little less likely. So while we are going to watch this wave very closely, the prospects of this coming all the way across the Atlantic are not as high as they would be, say, if this was September 1st instead of September 20th. Waves that started this journey a week and a half ago like Peter, have a chance to get to the U.S. Now, Peter, unfortunately for him, he had a cold front. He couldn't get here. He's going to have to get turned away. But that's the kind of time frame we're talking about. So let's take a look at Invest 98L tonight. And the system decently impressive. If you actually kind of look at this and you don't really pay a lot of attention, you may go, well, wait, that looks like a tropical storm. You got some banding features, some cirrus outflow, some nice thunderstorm activity clustered. Definitely looks like you got some rotation right here, but it's not quite to the surface yet. This has got a very vigorous mid-level rotation. It definitely does. But this storm being as far south as it is, again, your 10-degree north line is here, so it's definitely the lower latitudes. The lower you go in towards the equator, the less spin the Coriolis force of the Earth helps you get. So storms have a harder time really getting that rotation up enough to become an organized storm. So that's what the storm is going to fight. It'll eventually be able to overcome that, but it's not going to just burst on the scene immediately. An evening ASCAT pass, which is satellite-derived winds. There's no satellite data to back this up, but you can see that there's a very broad, kind of messy, surface circulation around 10 north, but it's not closed by any means. There's something trying to spin up maybe here, maybe here, maybe here. Bottom line is there's really nothing organized on the surface yet, and there's only very light northerly winds of about 20 knots, 25 miles an hour on the surface. So while the storm is really vigorous in the mid-levels, and once this gets to the surface, it will become a pretty healthy storm pretty quick. It's not quite there yet. Now, this persistent thunderstorm activity is going to go through the night. The diurnal minimum is going to come up. This is probably going to get a little more organized, and I would estimate by tomorrow or maybe Wednesday morning, we're going to have a tropical storm on our hands. This is going to be Sam. I was going to take another name off our list. It'll be the 17th named storm, and we're only going to have 3 names left for the Atlantic hurricane season, and then we're going to have to rotate to the backup naming list. So that's interesting. But anyway, 98L, or what is going to be Sam, going to be our last chance for an African wave to try to make the long trek. Now, what does the future of this storm look like? Well, we can look at our computer models for an initial guess. This is set to 180 hours out. So the models see the storm here tonight, and it's going to move off and be somewhere in the other end of the main development region of the Atlantic by Tuesday of next week. So a week from tomorrow, we expect the storm to be somewhere in this region on the European model, and the GFS really kind of has a similar solution. They're a little more tightly clustered, but has a solution like this. Now, a lot of these models, especially the European model, expect this to be a decently strong storm, probably a hurricane. It is very possible. The question really is, what does the weather pattern look like when this thing gets towards the Caribbean, towards the beginning of next week, middle of next week? And that's going to be the question. And right now, that's too hard to answer. So you can see the storm coming off of Africa here on the GFS. This is your 850 millibar low-level flow. This kind of shows you the general idea. So system, dirtles across for a couple days. You can see the GFS organizing it over the next few days. It'll be in a pretty good environment through Friday. This is Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's developed into a pretty significant, storm, probably a hurricane at this point. Monday into Tuesday. Now, on this particular run, it recurves well east of Bermuda. It doesn't even get near Bermuda, which is somewhere right here. But that's jumped around a lot. If I go back on a couple different model runs, that was one model run. That was earlier today. The model had it all the way up under Bermuda towards the Bahamas. A run before that, it's in the middle. A run before that, it's further south. A run before that, you see the problem here? the GFS is jumping all over the place with this because the evolution of the long wave pattern is what's in question. So let's go ahead and take you up in the atmosphere a little bit. We'll take you up to 500 millibars, and we have this set for Wednesday of next week. So this is about 9 days from now. The GFS on one model has a nice long wave trough, a nice upper level ridge, and has plenty of weakness in the ridge for the storm to turn north. Okay, the run before that, it's completely different. You have this gigantic high sitting over here. Subsequently, your storm is much further south, and then you have this big trough over the eastern U.S. That is one model run difference. That's almost a complete pattern flip. Like it's almost a 90, 180 degree pattern flip in one model run. So the GFS is really having a hard time figuring out what this upper level pattern might look like. European model, for what it's worth, does show a pretty strong trough. The good news is that both these models, the extended term, do show a strong trough. Another cold front, another reinforcing cold front coming in behind the one that's going to come in about 2 or 3 days across the eastern U.S. By Wednesday, Thursday, this big front comes through, it pushes Peter out. Well, then about a week from then, the models show yet another front coming through. If that shows up on time and it's this strong, it'll also take 98 out to sea. If it's not, and some ridging builds in, we might have an issue on our hands as the GFS kind of demonstrates in some of these runs. Stronger ridge, stronger ridge, stronger ridge. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolution plays out. Bottom line is 98L is worth watching, but it is far too early to say for sure like it's going to be a big deal or not. It's going to come across the Atlantic. It's going to be a decently strong storm. It's going to kind of pull up in the same general area Peter was. Right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be any large-scale inhibitive factors like Peter ran into. So the question really is, are we going to be able to turn this one out to sea and not have to worry about it, or are we going to have something to watch? Again, the hurricane season runs through the end of November, but the heart of the season runs through the middle to end of October. So you still got to be paying attention. This is probably some of the last African waves we'll watch. Then we'll turn our attention to the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico for kind of those homegrown October storms. So we're going to watch this one and the rest of them. But for tonight, Peter and Rose, no problem. The other area on the map, no problem. So we're just going to watch 98L over the next couple of days, and we'll check in periodically with updates on that. So that's what I got for you guys tonight, your topical update. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.